Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
I'm Kason.
How are you fellas doing today?
Tell us now.
How's everyone doing? We have some good topics today. I'm just pulling out the chat, so I'll be able to see it here. Got it now. So for those of you who aren't aware, I've had a couple people ask recently. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, you can check the description. There will be time codes so that you can skip to any one of the topics that we talk about. The title of the video is one of, between 6 to 8 sometimes topics that we talk about. So if we're talking about something and you have no interest in it, you can always skip ahead. If you're listening audio only, that's tough luck. You're just gonna have to listen to the whole thing.
we aren't about to mess with that. We'd have to put in the tags or something. That wouldn't work.
Yeah, it's not long enough. The field is not long enough, so it doesn't allow me to put topics plus time codes usually to list out all the topics. So anyways, but if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to skip ahead to something else. All right, I want to start off by just very briefly touching on Dragon Quest XI reviews. It seems the embargo dropped today for Dragon Quest XI.
Yeah, it's got like 50 or 60 reviews in right now,
and it's good score.
They're up. Yeah, I read the 2 lowest reviews, the only mixed reviews on Metacritic that Metacritic aggregated, and both of the criticisms were like, "Oh, the game didn't try to do very many new things."
Yep,
and it's like. It's Dragon Quest, man. I mean, you can fall for that if you were expecting that, but everyone else is saying this game's freaking perfect.
Yeah, it's funny because like, at least among like our community and other Final Fantasy centered communities, they lament the fact that it's not more like it was, that it's getting away from traditional RPG game design. And Dragon Quest,
it's like
has stayed the same. It's stayed very consistent. I won't say it stayed the same. I'll say it's been very consistent.
Yeah, through the iterations, the console generation, absolutely.
And that's what people like about it so much is that despite the fact, I mean, first of all, I really love the look of the game. The way that they've implemented the Akira Toriyama art style into like really high resolution, sometimes realistic looking textures on environments and stuff. They blended it really well.
Yeah, it's like a middle point. It's a really good middle point for animation.
I'm a big fan. I like it a lot. So anyways, it's just funny to me that they've made this really beautiful game that sits up there among all the games, all AAA games coming up now, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of its quality. Graphically, but it sticks to its roots in design philosophy and feels very much like the Dragon Quest series always has. And so I can understand somebody saying, like, I wish that they would modernize in certain aspects, but to accuse it of being too safe, I think is just a misunderstanding of what the Dragon Quest series is really all about.
Well, one of the lowest review score said that it did nothing to progress the genre of JRPG.
Come on, dude.
Every JRPG need to be pushing the envelope and progressing the definition and challenging preconceived notions. No, absolutely not. And to expect that is stupid. It is a JRPG. It's not a borderline like pushing the boundaries. It's Dragon Quest. They've been making these for a long time. Ugh.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's just like I totally agree with the sentiment that, first of all, you don't have to be trying to innovate in order to have like a really good game. And the expectation that if you're not doing that, if you're not pushing it forward in some way, then like that holds it back. Yeah, I just don't agree with that. So I'm really excited for it. I was surprised actually that the embargo was lifted today, since it's not out till like next week.
Yeah.
But it kind of a day or two before. It kind of like creeped up on me because I was like, oh yeah, Dragon Quest XI's coming out. I better finish some of these other games I'm playing.
See, that's the funny thing, because I was so excited about it because I wanted to play the 3DS
The
version.
3DS version, yeah.
And that's just not coming. And it kind of killed it for me. Like, I got so excited to play the 3DS version that Japanese people can play. When it just sucks that I even knew that existed, because I probably would want to play Dragon Quest XI, but what I consider to be the superior version isn't showing up. And I only want to play the definitive superior version of the game, which to me is that small 2D overhead 16-bit screen at the bottom of your 3DS. That's the definitive version of this game to me. And they won't let me play it. So I don't know. That's what killed it for me. I kind of stopped paying attention.
Yeah, it's a shame that they didn't port the 3DS version, though to some degree I understand. I know that Nintendo's kind of just like dropping the 3DS, at least here in like North America or whatever. They've kind of just let it go.
The 3DS is so large, though. I don't know.
But in Japan, I'm sure more people are probably playing 3DSs regularly than they are here. Yeah. So, like, I get it. It is still too bad because it's a very cool idea, and I want to see them implement that in more modern RPGs of, like, long-running franchises. But I am very excited to get the PlayStation 4 version. I wish that the Switch version were launching at the same time.
I know, because that's the one I really want.
Yeah, I would probably play that one. Like... The thing about the Switch, it's so weird, is like, I play the PlayStation 4 more than the Switch, but there's something about the like thought in the back of my head that says, well, what if you did want to take this, which I never do, on the go with you?
I know, what if?
Then at least you have the option to, even though I literally
every now and
never
then,
do
though,
it.
you take the train down south, and it's like, you're sitting on a train. I mean, you got time to do something.
Yeah, I've been afraid to take the Switch on the train. I usually take my 3DS instead. Because like someone steals my 3DS, whatever, I'll get another 3DS.
Right, that's like $100 or something. Now, yeah, $80.
But if someone steals my Switch, like, no, screw that, dude. Because I have a lot of games like downloaded on it too. I guess it's tied to my account, so I could download them again. But anyways. Yeah, I'm sure I'll get more comfortable taking the Switch around, and as a little more time goes by and more people have them, and it's not like, I know when it first came out, it was really hard to get one. They were sold out everywhere, and so I was really afraid to take it anywhere at that point. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'm thinking about doing some kind of vacation around like November, December. Maybe I'll take it with me then. But who knows when Dragon Quest will be out? Dark Souls will be out by then.
Until next year.
But speaking of Switch, we'll come back to Dragon Quest XI in just a second.
Right,
but
I had their
today,
this morning.
Yeah, the Nindies, all the indie games.
Yeah, Hyper Light Drifter, come to the Switch,
dude.
That's the only one that really
excites me so much. I am totally buying it again.
Cool.
I wish there was a physical copy of it. And like part of me is hesitant to buy it at launch because I have it on PC, right?
Yeah.
And I played it fairly recently, but I would buy it like in a second if there was a physical copy on Switch, because there is a physical PS4 version. So I want to get it on the Switch, but I'm kind of like wondering whether I'll wait to see if they release like a physical copy of it, because if that's the case, that's the one I want. I don't want to buy it like twice for the same console just to get the physical copy. But I'm very, very excited that's coming to the Switch. I decided when I saw that I'm probably going to do a video on Hyper Light Drifter this week. I've been wanting to do one for a while. I've had an idea stirring in my head about what I should do. But like this is a perfect opportunity because it's going to release on the Switch on Monday on the 6th.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
So that's like a perfect time to release a video on it.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to do a Hyper Light Drifter video this week. So anyways, that's cool. They got Bastion and Transistor. A lot of other games that have been out for a while, but they're getting ported. And some people are kind of upset because they're like, this is all the Switch is now. There's no new games. They just port old indie titles all over. It's like,
Yeah.
It's okay, guys. It's all right.
At the moment, just wait.
We got Metroid coming out. We got Fire Emblem coming. We've got, there'll be big games coming.
Yeah.
But it's nice that all of these indie developers are finding a home on the Switch, and that obviously people are supporting it because they just keep bringing them over. So
yeah.
Anyways, so that happened today. Lots of cool indie games coming to the Switch here in the coming months. But back to Dragon Quest XI.
Oh,
yeah, I'm very excited. Very, very excited for it. I'm trying to figure out, because does it come out on the 6th as well, or is it on the 4th? Or 8th?
I thought it was Thursday, but I could be wrong.
Hold on. When is Dragon Quest XI coming out?
I thought it was the 6th.
Release date. Because the 6th is Monday. Oh, don't give me the Japanese release. We already knew it came out last year.
That's what. Oh man, that's funny.
I want to know when it's coming out in the U.S. The 4th. So it's coming out on. Wow. What day is that? Today's the 28th. That's going to be the. Oh, that's Tuesday. That's a week from today.
Yeah,
okay.
That'll be 2 days.
Okay, so never mind. The 6th is not. What? I thought the 6th was Monday. It's not. The 3rd is Monday.
Thursday. That's when most games come out. But.
Yes. Okay, I was mistaken. I was thinking maybe I could. Yeah. Anyways, I'm still going to do a Hyper Light Drifter video this week. It'll just come out a couple days before the game's release. Okay, that makes more sense. So it's a Tuesday. So next Tuesday, a week from today, Dragon Quest XI comes out. Anyways, it's going to be awesome. I'm excited for it. I like to hear that that it has stuck to its traditional, like old school JRPG roots.
Yeah, I think it's great. My understanding from what I read of the reviews, which were non-spoilery, right? But they're saying that this has the best story for a Dragon Quest game.
Yeah, that excites me too.
The recent installments.
Yeah, that excites me a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be playing it. I'll let you guys know what I think as I'm playing it. It's probably gonna be very long, like most Dragon Quest games are. So I'll probably finish it in like a year. but I'll be picking it up for sure. All right. Let's move on. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah, I saw this.
It was that was an intense demo. 48 minutes.
It was crazy. Yeah.
48 minutes of gameplay, and they had this guy sort of like narrating over the whole thing and sort of explaining it more in depth. So, well, we'll get into, because there was somebody on Patreon who asked a question regarding to this, and I'll dive into it in a minute, but it was Devontae Wesley. He was asking about what we think about it switching to the first-person perspective, and whether or not that's going to, affect it in any way for us, our enjoyment of it or whatever. But as for the demo itself, I don't even know where to begin. There was like so much there. It was a really, really long video.
Yeah, it was cool. It had kind of a Half-Life, dare I say it, a Half-Life 3 feel to it. It felt cool, generally speaking, and I mean, it's Cyberpunk. Everything I was seeing is exactly what I imagined when I think of Cyberpunk. So
yes.
I was like, wow, this fits pretty well.
It's a very well realized world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like the speed of the combat, of the shooting mechanics and everything. I mean, you're watching that, and they keep. It's funny because I remember at E3 they did this too, but they really emphasize it's a first-person role-playing game. They don't want to call it a shooter, but it looks
an awful lot like a shooter to me.
It really like has the same fast pace as like an FPS. Now you see like when she's like firing, there's like individual bullets do an individual amount of damage. So like the damage will pop up like pop, 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 and you see like 18, 14, which I'm sure is calculated with a dice roll.
Yeah, just a random number, Jen.
So they definitely have like all the elements of like RPG mechanics in terms of as far as that goes. Like they were talking about how she got like her jacket off of the hanger, and it's like this will add boosts to your defense, and there was something else. Had to street cred, I think they call it. Yeah, so like street cred is like a thing that will I'm I don't remember specifically what they said, but if I'm to make a guess, it's kind of like a charisma stat or something like that. It would make it easier for you to interact or persuade or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's it's really intense. It's definitely a rated M game,
Oh,
like
absolutely.
hardcore rated M game. So if you're not into like the really intense violence, nudity, like lots of profanity, that's I
Mhm.
mean it's just laced with that stuff, right?
It was funny
Um,
because I was at work actually when I started watching the trailer, and I had the audio off, right? So
yeah.
I didn't hear any of the stuff you're talking about with the guy narrating. I didn't even know he was narrating. I was just
Oh, nice.
watching the footage, and that showed up, and I was like, all right, I'll skip that part just a little bit, but I wasn't expecting it. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, it like one thing that I thought was super cool was that like basically everybody in this world is has like implants, right? It's kind of like Deus Ex. I
Yeah,
think
that was
somebody,
crazy how he was like hooking up. It's kind of like a Horizon Zero Dawn thing almost. Like there was some
yeah.
weird,
So
something weird
like
going on there.
everybody has is augmented, is basically a cyborg. They have
Yeah.
machine parts in them, and there was a certain section towards the end of the demo where like anyways, they were doing a side quest. I don't want to explain the whole thing, but like the idea that you could like hack people, like
Yeah.
hack enemies, and you could like make it so that his brain couldn't like connect to his weapon. So like she like jumps out and she like hacks this guy so he can't fire. So there was like two enemies, and then she like runs up and like kills the one guy, and the guy's like sitting there struggling, like he can't like fire his weapon or whatever. It was a really interesting like it kind of opened up like this realm of possibilities that would be really cool if they explored this idea of an entire society that is so like dependent, is so ingrained in tech that
Yeah.
you can like literally like hack them and not like prevent them from being able to do certain things as like a path versus because there's it's an RPG and they're talking about letting the player choose, right? Like
Mhm.
what if that opened up an avenue for like a pacifist run where you don't kill anybody, but you like
Sure.
invested into like hacking and just like preventing your enemies from attacking you and sneaking by and stuff like that. I don't know how possible that'll be, but
Like
it
the way
just
Deus Ex works, kind of.
yeah, it just seemed like a really cool idea that like that's the weakness. You know, you gain the benefits of like I don't know, obviously act faster reaction time, you know, computer level like calculations and being able to act really quickly, having, you know, super strength, infused bones, whatever it is, all the benefits you get from cyber technology, you would also run the risk of somebody just hacking you and like you're completely useless, you know? Like that
Yeah.
would be the strength of say somebody who had no implants, who had just remained like a regular human. You know
I
what I mean?
think
In a
there's a
world like
movie
that.
with Bruce Willis about that, about how they decided he didn't want the whole like Ghost in the Shell prosthetic thing, so he was like
Yeah.
a normal person. And then all of a sudden, oh, what was it called? Starts with a
So,
T, I think. Anyways, he keeps his own body, whereas, and then everything goes crazy, and he has to save the world.
yeah. It's just like I don't know. That would be a real. That would. I hope that they explore that to some degree in the story.
Yeah,
Like the idea that like maybe there's a group of people who are like totally against cybernetics and totally against augments or whatever they call it.
kind of like an
And
environmentalist thing, like a
yeah,
naturalist,
yeah,
super
like we're
conservative kind of thing.
yeah we're the real humans in this
Yeah,
world. You know, like we're the last vestige or whatever. And it's like they are the
that would be
ones. You
cool
know.
politically. That would be interesting.
Anyways, there's cool possibilities. Like they've definitely put a lot of thought into the world building and the lore. They had a section where they were kind of talking about their focus on consistency in the world and the way that they've constructed the society and everything like that. And that part of it, I'm really excited for. Now, moving into the part that Devante wanted us to talk about, the switch
Yeah,
into the first person perspective. Um, Honestly, it doesn't bother me at all. They use the word immersion, which I think is kind of like the go-to thing to say when someone's like, we're putting it in the first person perspective because we want
it's
it to
more
be
immersive. Yeah,
fully
and it
immersive.
lends itself towards VR maybe things like that.
Yeah. And like, I don't personally really buy into that. Like, I don't find that I'm more immersed in a first person game than I am in a third person game, like literally
I
ever.
feel more limited in first person.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So like that part of it, like I'm not, I don't really buy into that. But it for how fast paced it is as a shooter, I'm not sure, at least for the speed and the excitement that they're going for, whether it would have worked in the third person.
Yeah.
Because it
That's a
takes
good
like
point.
it seems to me like it's gonna. Well, it depends on what abilities you have, because she kind of had like a slowdown ability, which allowed her to sort of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
aim better. But maybe if you didn't take that path or get that ability or whatever, it takes a little bit like quicker, I think, aiming and like I guess in like first person shooters they have the whole aiming down the sights thing, but in third person shooters you're running around and then you have to like hold that button. It has to like kind of zoom in the camera and then you have to like start aiming at
Yeah, it's
people.
harder. Yeah.
It's just a fraction of a second slower, I would say.
Hmm.
But for how fast paced this game is, I could see how that would be a deciding factor or determining factor in why they wanted to just go full on into the first person perspective. And to me, it's fine because it looks really great. It seems to play really smoothly and really fast paced. And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of abilities, and a lot of cool stuff that they have going on there. So it doesn't bother me by any means that they're doing it in first person perspective, despite the fact that generally I prefer third person. But in this case, I think it's fine. Um,
I it did take away a little bit from me.
really?
I didn't like that it was in first person. I remember thinking the whole time, like, because people were saying, especially on Twitter, people were like, this game looks so revolutionary and innovative, right? And I watch it, and I'm like, it didn't. I
Didn't
know
feel
you're
that way.
limited in like how you follow your character. That even if it's third person, that it's not going to look all that different. But the little gun in front of your hand and you're going around the world shooting everything. It didn't look necessarily. It's just that the world you were in was cool, right? But it's like Call of Duty just in a future world. I didn't sense much. If you told, like, I was surprised to hear, or not to hear, I was surprised to be reminded, I guess, that CD Projekt Red is who made this game, and I was like, huh. I mean, it looks like something. Once you go into first person, all these games kind of start blending together and looking very similar.
Mm.
And I felt like, and maybe I'd be wrong, but I felt like the game would have been better for me just watching it if it wasn't first person, because I didn't see necessarily what was so special about it.
Mm. We've got somebody here, I think it's J Scar Music, was saying they'll probably have a third person mod on the PC version of the
Oh,
game.
probably.
Yeah,
Probably
they
they third
probably will.
person Skyrim, so I'm sure they'll do it for this one.
One thing I did, it's going along the lines of what you're saying though, you know how like FPS games tend to blend together and look
Yeah.
very samey. I felt like the guns themselves were really uniquely designed.
Yeah.
Like the shotgun that she was using there for a while.
Yeah.
Like it had like kind of all those like rivets in sort of like a parallel pattern kind of coming out at an angle on either side of like the barrel of the gun. The way that like it was loaded and like the way it kind of like what do you call it? I don't know, kind of came apart. I felt like the guns were really cool. Like the guns were really uniquely designed. I hadn't seen something like that before personally. Of course, I don't play a lot of FPS games, so maybe there are other guns that look similar, but it felt to me at least the guns and like the way that they were using abilities mid fight, like it seemed to be less like there seemed to be a good balance. At least what the person, everyone who plays is going to play it differently, but at least from what they were showing, there was a good balance between like using abilities, which I'm assuming are part of a class that you or a path, an ability skill tree or something.
Mm-hmm.
They were using that like half of the time, and then half the time they're kind of just doing run and gun kind of shooting. So it seems to me that at least where it might differentiate from like the standard FPS is in the fact that they'll probably try to give you access to a lot of really cool abilities that could be likened to spells or something like that, right? Um, Maybe something in the realm of like Bioshock, where like
Bioshock's
you
what
had
I
a
was
lot
thinking,
of
yeah.
those kinds
Where
of
you
like
like
abilities.
stab your arm and it's like
Yeah, yeah, and they kind of had what seemed to be I don't know, like they were using some kind of item, it seemed like, to like enhance them for like a minute or give them an ability for a period of time, and then it would wear off or something like that. Oh, and then J-Scar is bringing up the ricochet bullet skill, which I thought was really interesting. I hadn't seen something like that before. So he's kind of like shooting, and then the bullets are ricocheting off the wall and hitting a guy around the corner. So
that's pretty cool.
I think that the abilities will help differentiate it a little bit, but I can see why people who generally maybe aren't into FPSs or feel like FPSs all kind of feel samey
Right.
would be concerned that this will kind of fall into a similar camp.
One of the funny things about FPSs for me is that I know that they say you're more immersed when you're FPS because it's like you're the person, but that only goes so far, I think. I identify as essentially the gun that's in front of the screen. Like, what am I doing in that? Well, I'm not doing anything. My character is literally just a camera floating through the world, but there's a gun in front of that camera, and that's what I identify with. I'm like, I am this gun, right? And the gun's going around shooting people, and you doing what guns do, and you're there isn't necessarily a person behind the gun. It's just a gun floating in front of the screen, and that may be why I'm so. Like, I like first-person shooters. I've played a lot of them, but when you've got this innovative, super awesome, cool new game, and you make it into a first-person shooter, it doesn't feel super awesome, innovative, or new to me at all.
Well, I'm trying to think of any other thoughts I had while I was watching it. Overall, like my excitement for it, I think, is a little bit lower than when I heard that they were working on a Cyberpunk game, right? Because like when they first announced it, it was like just like that slow motion like CGI little animation they had of like the prostitute robot in the street, and like all the cops were shooting at it and stuff. And it was just like kind of giving the sense of like tone and that sort of thing for the game would have. I definitely wasn't expecting from that, just given CD Projekt's like history, that it would become the game we're seeing now. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think the game looks bad. I think it looks really good. It just might not like quite be in the same vein of the kind of game I usually like to play a lot.
Sure,
so
that's fair.
I think it looks great, but I'm just not like as stoked for it as I was before.
Me too.
I learned.
But hey, man, that game lit Twitter up tonight.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It'll do just fine, I think, without our support.
I'll probably still play it.
You think?
Yeah. I don't know when. I might not get it at launch, depending on how reviews go and stuff like that, and getting a look at first impressions and.
I know we just saw 48 minutes, but I'd have to see more.
Yeah, same here. Okay. Well, anyways, there you go, Devante. Our thoughts on Cyberpunk. Let's move into our next question here from Arnicles. How do you feel about pets or other familiars and companions in video games? Fable 2 springs to mind, where the pet was pretty involved in the gameplay. Which Final Fantasy could have had a pet fit well into the gameplay? For example, in FF5, if Boko could also be part of the party. It's a very good example from FF5. The only other FF game that springs to mind was, what was Renoa's dog's name? The one that she like launches off of her arm like a freaking like rocket.
Yeah. Oh, it comes and helps fight.
Yeah, the dog.
Yeah,
I forget the name of the dog.
Oh shoot, I forgot about that dog.
Anyways,
I don't know its name. I couldn't tell you.
Someone will tell us here in the comments here in just a minute. But
oh, that's crazy though. I remember that. That's funny.
That's the only thing that comes to mind immediately is Renoa's dog could have worked as a companion or character or a familiar character or whatever. Anyways, aside from that, though, Fable 2 is a good example. I remember being pretty attached to the dog in Fable 2. I mean, Shadow of the Colossus is an example where most people didn't like the horse very much.
Right. Yeah.
Angelo. Everyone's saying Angelo. Angelo is the name of the dog. Yep, everyone's just saying Angelo.
Oh, Angelo from FF8. I got you. Yeah. The dog animal. What the? Okay. Anyways.
So no, the only other game that I can even think of, and this is like a class thing, right? So I used to watch a Let's Play of Neverwinter Nights from a channel called My Name is Lily. Because
I remember him.
If you guys have not seen this channel, he doesn't upload anymore.
Oh, he doesn't? Oh, man.
Oh, it's been years and years and years. But
he is a true role player. Like,
yes.
He is as real as it gets when it comes to this kind of stuff.
So what he did for his Neverwinter Nights Let's Play is he basically like narrated, like he wrote, I'm guessing, like wrote his own story and then like narrated it as if he was, I don't know, like reading for a freaking audiobook or something. So like he's just there like narrating, like as he's walking around town, he's like describing like the people and he's describing like the thoughts of his character and he's describing like he's just like filling everything out. I used to listen to it while I'd go to sleep because it's
his voice is pretty soothing.
It's fascinating and it's very soothing to listen to. But anyways, in Neverwinter Nights, the character, which he had actually been playing since Baldur's Gate, so he played the same character from Baldur's Gate 1, 2, and then into Neverwinter Nights. So he was like, that's what you do in tabletop RPGs. You just take your character sheet and you just go into a new campaign with it, and you just keep playing the same character or whatever. Right. So that's kind of what he was doing through those D&D video games. In any case, his character had a familiar. It was like a panther or something like that would like fight with him. And so, like, that's literally the only other example I can think of a game that I know of that I have any experience with where, like, there was a familiar or a companion character. They're cool when you can pull them off well. I think that often they're just used as the very obvious emotional gut punch because you know that they're going to try and kill your companion character at some point.
Yeah,
your companion animal.
Yeah.
You know they're going to do it. You know they're going to like kill it, and it's supposed to be really sad, and you can kind of see it coming from a mile away. So anytime I would see that that's what they're doing, they're like trying to give you a little dog or an animal to go with you. It's like, well, this animal's probably gonna die.
Probably, yeah. Don't get too attached. I see a lot of people mentioning The Last Guardian. That's like
I didn't finish that game.
Cat, but you know, it's close enough, I guess. That's a good. That's close. That's probably as close as it gets, honestly, to being attached to an animal familiar, right?
I've only played like a couple hours of that game.
Yeah, I mean, I've played past where we've played, but I still haven't beaten it either. You get pretty attached to Trico. But I don't know. It's not like it's just you and Trico. So it's not like the way that you would interact with an animal in a normal game like Fable 2 or something like that. It's just you and the animal and how you interact, and the whole game is just based on that. So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good example, I guess, but it's not the kind of example that I would like to see, you know, implemented. I would like to have something a little more on lines of like Ash and Pikachu kind of thing, you know?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Your dog is literally a huge part of a huge story mechanic, not just a small one that's there so that it can die later.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that, like, if you can avoid the trope or the cliche of just killing it so that you can have an emotional moment.
Yeah.
And if it can be implemented in a way kind of like The Last Guardian, but not quite so heavily, because you need Trico at all times to, like, proceed through the game's
can't do anything,
puzzles.
Yeah.
Without it, it's like the whole game's mechanics are based on that animal. But if it was like it's an animal that's there to... For a large portion of the game to help you or whatever, maybe it can help you solve certain puzzles. Like, you know, it's kind of like the trope of, actually, I'm taking this back now, but it's the trope of companion characters in general, whether they're human or not, that it can crawl underneath the gate and then go step on the switch so that you can go through the door or something.
What's the
like
point
that.
of a companion character?
Yeah, it's like, If you can avoid those kinds of tropey gameplay mechanics and give them something interesting to add gameplay wise, but not make it all about them, but then at the same time just don't kill them just for the sake of, you know, a tearjerker moment, then it's nice. It's nice. I think they're really cool.
I don't think any game has really pulled it off all that well, though. I'd say Last Guardian's the closest, but that's because that's all the game was. I haven't really seen a game pull it off super well, where you have this animal companion that like is one of the main characters, basically. And honestly, if at the end of Fable 2, what happened didn't happen, I may not have actually cared about the dog as much. It wasn't until it happened that I was like, oh shoot,
oh my dog. Yeah.
So
yeah, because you could kind of
do that, then it's like I may have not actually cared that much about the dog.
You could like play fetch with the dog. The dog helped you like find hidden treasures. So like it would be like bark, 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 and you'd run over there and dig and like get something out of the ground. It would help you fight sometimes. But outside of that, yeah, it just kind of ran around with you. It didn't really like.
It just kind of followed you,
yeah. Anyways, I don't know. Don't have too much experience. Don't have much of an opinion on it, but it's about as much as I can say.
Me too.
Front. Thank you, Articles, for the question. Moving on to Chocolate Rob. This one's going to be tough. Well, not tough, but there's just a lot to think of.
This will be tough for me to even name.
Okay, I have a guide here. Let me send it to you so that you can reference something. And so you have, because that's I felt the same way. I was like, dude, like I can't even think of like a quarter of all the freaking Final Fantasy minigames, and most of them I hate anyways. So like,
yeah,
how am I going to do this? Anyways, that link should take you to a document that kind of lists out like most of them for the series.
Let's see
this. So here's Chocolate Rob's question. What are the 5 best and worst Final Fantasy minigames? What makes a good minigame? What minigames have you enjoyed from other RPGs? I'm not usually a big fan of minigames, I'll be honest. Now, I say that with the caveat that I feel like Final Fantasy VII had the right idea. Even though I think that its minigames are, you know, kind of all over the place in terms of execution.
Yeah.
But it had the right idea. It has by far the most minigames in the series. FF7 just like blows every other FF game out of the water. Has so many of them. And what I love about the way FF7 uses minigames is that it's using it for like pacing purposes. It's not just an optional side thing you can do. A lot of times they're mandatory, like the G-Bike minigame when you're escaping Midgar. The snowboarding minigame when there's a lot of them. There's the underwater like submarine minigame. A lot of these you have to actually do at least once in the course of the story. Now the reason I like that is because it breaks up the monotony of traditional turn-based RPGs, which is mostly just run, fight, run, fight, run, fight, run, fight, watch some cutscenes in a new town, buy some new gear, run, fight, run, fight, run, fight, run, fight. And there's just, and you know, this is something that like, it's a sentiment, like as upset as people were at Video Game Donkey for his review of Octopath Traveler, there's at least one sentiment that I don't necessarily agree with wholeheartedly with him, but I get why it's so frustrating. And that's the fact that a battle takes just like so much longer in a turn-based RPG than in almost any other genre you can think of.
Yeah.
You see a Goomba, you jump on him and you move on. In Zelda, you see an enemy in front of you, you slice him a couple times with a sword, you move on. It takes like literally less than 5 seconds most of the time to dispatch an enemy and move on. In RPGs, especially older RPGs that are random encounters, you have the whole transition into the battle screen. You have these swooping camera shots that like introduce who the enemy is, and then they pull back and you have to like attack it through 2 rounds, maybe sometimes 3 rounds. In Octopath Traveler's case, sometimes, you know, longer, depending on how experienced you are with the mechanics and, you know, how well you know the abilities. But, you know, it takes more like 30 seconds to a minute to get through a battle, a random battle in an RPG. versus a couple seconds of something else. So it's like battling can get so tedious and feel so long, especially for people who aren't like the most excited about that style of combat. So that being said, I really like how Final Fantasy VII used its just plethora of mini games to kind of break that up and to give you something else to do and just to introduce something fresh so that you were like, oh man, it continues to be exciting from beginning to end. I think it really did a good job of that. So, that being said, I like that it did that, but it had by far the most mini games, and a lot of them I felt were really quite frustrating. So, let's see here. If I'm going to name my favorite mini games from the series, I'm probably going to skip over the really early ones. Most of them didn't have them anyways. I think Final Fantasy IV only got mini games in the DS remaster, or not remaster.
Yeah, I never played any. I played the SNES version.
I saw that there was a couple of mini games. It seems to be that they were added in like the PlayStation Portable re-releases of Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy II. I've never touched those before. In Final Fantasy VI, they had those sections where you'd be in a dungeon and they'd have like multiple paths, and you'd split your party up.
Yeah.
You'd split your party up and then sort of like block different like choke points and then like, fight the incoming enemies. I liked that. I thought that was kind of cool. They did it a couple times. Once was early on with Locke in the Marsh Cave, and or Narsh Cave, I think, with the Mughals, right, defending Terra. And then they did it again later on. Like Kefka had like an army marching up the mountain, and you split like your own party. You select like you're going with you into like little groups of like 4 or 3 or whatever. You sort of like position them on the map and sort of like wait for the enemies to come at you and fight. I like that. It's still the same battle system, same fighting, but it at least did feel fresh, kind of different from like your standard sort of like progression through the game when you're going through a dungeon and fighting things. So I like that. I'll count that as a mini game, even though some people might not.
Yeah.
Okay, then we move into FF7. And this is going to sound funny, but I loved the squatting minigame.
That was great, yeah.
When you're in the slums and you have to get the wig.
If you got good rhythm, then you can do it no problem.
And it was dual parts, like, I think, simple, right? Like, there was still an element of timing to it. So you had to, like, time it correctly and get into a rhythm, which I liked. That's like the gamey aspect of it, the skill, if you can call it that. But then beyond that, it's just freaking hilarious. It just looks so funny.
It looks
like
really funny.
And the situation's funny, and like I just really liked it. And I loved that they brought squatting as a minigame back into Crisis Core.
In Crisis Core, that was so funny. Yeah,
and they animate like the same way. It's like, I thought that was hilarious. I loved that in Final Fantasy VII. So the squatting minigame in Final Fantasy VII, I liked a lot. And then I liked Super Dunk, which I know a lot of people didn't like, the basketball arcade game. For me, that's like the best way to get GP at the Gold Saucer before you're able to like consistently win in the Chocobo races.
The Chocobos, yeah.
Yeah, but it's probably a little simplistic, so I did like in Final Fantasy VII the Battle Square. The Battle Square, I think, was much improved over the Coliseum in FF6. So I'll go with Battle Square as number 3 for my favorite minigames. Most other minigames in FF7 I don't like. And then in Final Fantasy VIII, I loved Triple Triad, the card game in 8. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was cool.
It can be a bit annoying sometimes with the way the rules change, but there are ways around that.
Yeah, depending on where you're playing. But yeah. I think it was cool because you never really knew when it was going to happen as you were going around talking to people, and then all of a sudden you talk to somebody 2 times and they're like, they have their fake made up names. I can't remember what they all are, but like, secretly I'm so-and-so. Let's duel. It's always fun.
And then in FF15, actually, I really like the fishing. At first, I didn't think I would. I was like, fishing, there's no good fishing mini games except for in Zelda. That's it.
Fishing's fun in a lot of games,
though. But I think I finally got into it a little bit, and I learned the mechanics of it, and it was actually quite fun. I really, really enjoyed fishing in Final Fantasy 15, so that would be my number 5 for my favorites. Now, we're talking about least favorites. Most of them are coming from FF10. I hate the minigames in FF10. The Chocobo challenge, where you're trying to dodge the birds and collect the balloons, is probably my least favorite minigame in the entire series. Lightning dodging was super annoying. Just really, really, really frustrating. I did not like that at all. A lot of people love Blitzball, and I don't hate Blitzball. I think Blitzball's okay, but it's a little too clunky and janky for me. I don't like how it feels to play.
If that game was like remade now, that would be a fun game to play.
Oh yeah, if they just made a Blitzball game and that was like all they focused on, it could be freaking sweet.
Be a pretty good idea.
Could be freaking sweet. I really strongly dislike Triple Triad. Or not Triple Triad, the other one, FF9's Tetramaster.
Tetra, yeah.
I do not like Tetramaster in FF9. And I don't like Chocobo Hot and Cold. And then, let's see. What else would I pick? That's one of my least favorites. I mean, Butterfly catching in FF10 is it's a honorable mention. And I would say Bone Village, the excavation minigame in FF7, is an honorable mention on the other side of it. So one that I also liked, but maybe it's like number 6 of my favorites or whatever. I liked the excavation minigame in FF7. That was kind of cool. I'll just say Coliseum in FF6. Did not like the Coliseum. It was very annoying to me. So those are my picks. My 5 favorite, my 5 least favorite in the FF7 or in the FF series.
Jeez. Well, so for me, a lot of these games I have a hard time with, I guess. I have a hard time remembering a lot of them. The card game for Final Fantasy VIII is fun. I personally like the card game in 9 also. I think the reason a lot of people don't like it is because there's a greater element of like randomness in Final Fantasy 9, which means you can't get good enough to win every time. But in Final Fantasy 8, you can. Whereas in Final Fantasy 9, you can't. Like, no matter what, you can get good enough to win like 85% of the time. But it's never like a guarantee, right? So
sure.
Anyways, but I got pretty good at it. Good enough to where I was like, this is fun. And actually, I really liked it. The squatting minigame is classic. I liked racing chocobos until for the first like hour.
Yeah, and then it's just like stupid because you're gonna win every time. You're just doing it
like
over and over.
I don't know. It's really, it wears after a while. If that was shorter, it would be one of my more favorite mini games because it's always fun to kind of go through that process, but it just takes way too long.
Yeah.
Geez, and I've been going through these as you have, and I'm like, I don't know, mini games to me, they're just mini games. They're not. They're just little decided
like
things
love
from
or
the
hate.
story, and none of them are like that fun. I guess really. I like the bike when you're leaving. Also when you're jumping out of the cathedral with Aerith from her like garden place, and then the Turks are chasing you, you got to throw barrels down at them.
The barrels down, yeah.
They're listing that as a mini game here, and that was fun, I guess. But that's short. That's like that. I don't even know if I call that a mini game.
It's hard to classify that as a mini game. I guess you technically could, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Mm-hmm. So, geez, like mini games that I hated. I have a really hard time with that because when a mini game shows up, I just kind of figure it out and do it. And I don't typically do it for fun. Usually you get something for the mini games.
Yeah,
and I do it until I get the thing I'm looking for. And then I never do it again.
Yep, that's basically me too, for the most part.
But
for the most part,
that I hated. Like the snowboarding minigame in Final Fantasy VII, I loved it at first, but you're going so fast. And the PlayStation 1 is not very responsive, and the controller's just really, it's not great. And it was so hard for me to do that run clean without hitting anything. I don't think I ever could actually do it.
Yeah, I was not a fan of the snowboarding. I was also not a fan of the G-Bike for the same reason. Now,
yeah,
it's not quite as difficult to control, in my opinion, as the snowboarding one.
Yeah, snowboarding's harder.
But like
faster.
I don't know. It's just so it's either like way too twitchy, like way too responsive, and it's just like you just like weave like way fast, or it's like there's a delay element to it as well. So like when you try to attack, it's like this long wind up, and that makes sense because it's a freaking heavy, huge sword. But it's like one half of controlling this guy is just like this twitch reaction, just like darting around like crazy, like way too fast, way too much. And then the other half of it is trying to get him to like, and so like trying to like sync those two things up, I felt was more frustrating than it was fun. And I think that the snowboarding minigame is even worse in terms of like, you're going downhill really fast. Now you could slow yourself down by kind of like you can brake a little bit to like, you know, so that you're not going so fast. But if you're just using the D-pad to turn, it's like a really wide, slow turn, and then you use R and L, and it's like like 90 degrees,
way too fast. Yeah,
when it's just like there's no gradient between like super effing slow or literally 90 degrees on a dime, and it's just like, dude, I am not freaking taking the time it takes to like figure out how to make because it's a long run too, right? Like going down that mountain.
Yeah, it takes a long time.
It's a couple minutes, I think, like between 2 and 3 minutes at least. And so it's like you don't have. It's not like you're able to quit and get back into it and like try that section again and like practice it. You'd have to like go through the entire mountain descent and then go over and over. So it was just, I don't know. I found it very frustrating. I didn't like it at all.
I have a question about Final Fantasy 9 towards the beginning with the I want to be your canary and you have to do the button combination. What's the highest score you've ever gotten doing that?
Well, I've never done it without save states.
Okay.
Like actually completed it all the way through. I think that because you have to do like 100 in a row, don't you, or something like that?
Well, to do it like perfectly,
to get the because Queen Braun gives you rewards based on how well you do.
Yeah, and I always do it up to like 60% or whatever passing is, and then
that's right. It's like a percentage thing.
Because I'm like, I'm not doing this again.
Anyways, I don't remember exactly how it works, but I just remember that like you have to do it like basically perfectly without missing once.
That's so hard
in order to get like the best rewards, which of course are like early game rewards. So it's like, who cares after like 5 hours?
It doesn't matter that much. Yeah,
I tried it many times without save states, and I could not. I just never. I almost get close. I'd get close. It's like right there, and it's like one of those things where you've done it like a bunch of times and you start to get like a little sweaty in the palms, and it's like you're in the rhythm and you're doing it perfectly every time, and then you just start a little nervous because it's like, okay, we're almost at the end. You just got to do it like 2 or 3 more times and you got it, then you mess it up. It's one of those kinds of things. So I ended up just like save stating like halfway through and then just finishing the second half.
That was fun and cool, but that's kind of how I think of most mini games, where it's like, oh, that was fun and cool and all, but I don't like want to do it. I don't want to continue to do that.
Yeah. Anyways, what makes a good mini game? That's a great question. I guess like what I would say to that is either because in a game like freaking like Final Fantasy, I mean, those games are huge. There's so much going into them, and it was very ambitious, I feel, for Square to put as many mini games into FF7 as they did. And it would be, I think, wrong to expect that those would be executed like immaculately, you know, like they're just like super amazingly polished mini games.
Right.
Maybe on the level of something like Mario Party or something, you know, where it's like the whole game is mini games, so like they better be pretty good. They better be like well refined and control well and all that stuff. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was just gonna say like they're fun. They're fun little in the earlier Final Fantasy games. They're fun like escapes from like essentially what you're doing. You mentioned how monotonous a JRPG is typically, anyways, and the mini games kind of give you a little escape from that. It's just funny because a lot of people, I'd say most people, will play video games as a form of escapism, sort of from their normal lives, and then within the game you have another form of escapism within the game that's what they call it, a mini game, I guess. But it's just funny that that's kind of how humans work. Even if the game is super fun, if you're playing it for several hours in a row, you need an escape from that even sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So like if you have this big ambitious RPG, like I think what makes a good mini game is just something that's really simple. Something along the lines of click the buttons at the right time. Like they had the mini game in FF10 too, where it was kind of like freaking Dance Dance Revolution, where it's like they're coming down the screen and it's like left, right, up, down, X, triangle, and you're hitting it at the right time or in beat or something like that. But it doesn't require like a massive amount of skill or like very like precise controls, right? It's just like you're just timing it and you're just hitting it, and it's something that's challenging and it can take you a couple times, but doesn't have to be like incredibly frustrating or anything like that.
It's also not all that fun.
I like it all right. It depends on how crazy it gets, I suppose. I don't think that minigames should be like exceptionally hard for the most part. Like, you know, say with something like Dance Dance Revolution or Guitar Hero, which are that kind of game where you're if the game is that, then yeah, you're going to have some hard, difficult songs in there where you got to like really get good at it. But as a mini game, it shouldn't be like freaking ridiculous hard. I think it should just be like moderate. So moderate difficulty, something that, you know, you try once or twice and you kind of get the hang of, and something that doesn't require like really precise control. Usually racing does require precise control, so racing games for me are kind of out in terms of what makes good mini games. Like if you have the time to dedicate and you really, you know, put a lot of effort into it, then go. I mean, by all means, go for it. Like, sweet. But I think that keeping it simple is usually better. Something that's fun, addicting, and really simple and short. Something that you can do within a minute or less and then repeat it quickly. So that, like, if you mess up, it's like, you don't have to wait 3 more minutes till you get down the mountain to try it again. You can just like, whatever, just like fail and then try it again.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Mini games I'm not the biggest fan of anyways, but if you're going to have them, just keep it simple.
Super Mario RPG probably had the best mini games that I've played.
The barrel, where you're going down the
river and
you're jumping. See, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? Like, it's basically just you jump at the right time.
Yeah,
as
and
things
you
come at you,
which track you're going on,
and then you switch.
And there's rewards and punishments.
So it's actually in some ways, I mean, on a technical level, pretty similar to something.
That's actually true. That's
DDR,
true. Yeah.
Because it's coming at you, and you have to time it. You have to jump at the right time, and then you kind of move over, right? That's a good minigame, in my opinion. Or like in like Donkey Kong Country, or I guess in Super Mario RPG. Although Mario RPGs isn't as good, but I think it's because it's a minigame versus like an actual level design. But like the cart, the little cave mining cart sections, like that's cool too. Like you're timing the jumps, and that's the kind of thing that I think works really well as a minigame generally.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Rob, for the question. Let's move on to Captain Awesome here. This one was hard for me to think of 5 for each. I don't know if I'll be able to ultimately, but we'll see what we can do. What are 5 games you most want to see remastered for a current system? And what are 5 games you would most want to see remade for a current system? What aspect of them would you like to see changed in the remake? And do you have an idea for improvements? What system would these games be on? Okay. So for me, differentiating between what I want remastered and what I want remade is more or less just I want a port, but a really good one, of something that I loved before, but I don't want it changed. other than upscaled. It's in HD now or something.
Yeah.
But I just saw something funny. Heon said best mini game in FF13 or in Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy 13. It's funny because there's like literally one mini game in all of FF13, and it lasts like an entire like 25 seconds or something. So there's like no mini games in it. Okay, anyways, I got distracted. Whether you want something ported to a current system in HD or and untouched otherwise, maybe bugs fixed or little things, but or something like from the ground up remade, right? So, I can think of really only like one game I want remade from the ground up that I think justifies it. I could maybe think of two, but one for sure, and that is Xenogears. I think Xenogears had so much potential and did not have the resources it needed to really fulfill on that potential. And its ideas are so good that most people can look past its faults and they love it the way it is. I was very frustrated a lot of the time playing Xenogears, and had I been able to take away that sense of frustration, it would have been my favorite game probably ever. So seeing that game remade from the ground up on a current console, I don't know if I'd pick a console. I'd probably like to see it be multi-plat, something you can get on PC and PlayStation 4 and Xbox One or whatever. Possibly a Switch version if they could downscale. Excuse me, there's something in my throat today. But yeah, something that if Square didn't have one of their internal teams work on, say they went to Monolith, if Monolith was able to get out of whatever contractual obligation they have with Nintendo for one game. And Takahashi could come and just make Xenogears to completely fulfill his ambition with it and complete it the way that he saw it in his mind on a modern console. I would love that. Malis brought up the other one, and that is Vagrant Story. I think Vagrant Story could really, really use a remake, a full remake from the ground up.
Because you can tell that's kind of what they were trying to do to begin with. It was so cutting edge for its time that some of the things it tried to do have since been figured out better than they did it.
And, I've talked about in previous weeks how you could make that as like a Dark Souls clone and it could work perfectly. I still hold to that. I think it'd be great. But even if they wanted to stick with the same sort of like pausing the battle and aiming at the right, like body part or whatever. That is another element of Dark Souls games or like Monster Hunter 2. Hold on Resonance. On Resonance. Yay for Xenogears. Thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate your support. Thank you,
man. Appreciate it,
man. Monster Hunter and Souls games have like the concept of aiming for a body part too. If you cut the tail off, then it won't be able to do this attack, or it'll change its moveset. So I still hold to the fact that I would probably prefer it be done that way. However, even if they didn't do that, even if they had it essentially the same, I think that with modern tech, you could make the time spent in the menus. You could probably redesign the menus to make them a little less cumbersome.
Yeah, the menus for sure.
And make the game load quicker between screens and things like that. So like it can be very instantaneous when you go out of a menu and you're playing the game again. So either way, I think that Vagrant Story and Xenogears would be the two for sure I can think of I want to see totally remade from the ground up. Aside from that, I think any game that I'd want to play today, I could pick like a billion. I could pick like hundreds of games that I'd want to have remasters of. It'd be cool.
Yeah, basically remaster every game.
Tons of RPGs from the PlayStation, tons of games I grew up with on the NES and especially the N64. I think the N64 and PlayStation 1 era are the ones that need or could use remakes probably more or remasters because like they were just there at the beginning and they just look so funky now. Like I was watching some footage from one of the most beloved shooters, third-person shooters on the PlayStation 1, Siphon Filter. And like watching the guy run around, like his awkward like animation, like swerving, moving around, and like just like the incredibly low resolution rock textures of the environments he's running through, and just like the clunkiness of aiming because you can't run and aim at the same time, so you have to come to a stop and then like aim. You know, there's just stuff like that where it's like I feel like that era of games more than any other could really use it, but what we get instead are PlayStation 3 games remastered for the PlayStation 4. You know what I mean? So like,
well, some of it's just having two control sticks, right? Because the PlayStation 1 and N64, specifically for first-person shooters, only had one stick. So are you aiming on the screen or are you moving your character? And that's why you kind of had to stop in order to shoot. And why those games would do really well to have an update now.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if I'm going to pick 5. I mean, I'd like to see Final Fantasy VII remastered and not remade the way that they are doing it. I would want to see the game like untouched otherwise, but the same freaking like angles, like fixed camera angles, the same exact game, just with really, really cool, like modern, like, dude, they could make such freaking amazing looking pre-rendered backgrounds these days.
I know, seriously.
That could be
like
so
even their stuff that's rendering on the fly using your console's GPU. That stuff looks freaking super good. Like their pre-rendered stuff, just an image, that would look absolutely real.
They could do amazing stuff with that.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see one of those PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy games remastered in the sense that they just update the graphics and that's about it, and music, I guess, too. Yeah, anyways, that's about all I have to say on that.
Well, for me, like me too, as far as games being remastered, I'm just like, geez, remaster every game. It would be really cool to have a Link to the Past in Link Between Worlds style.
That would be cool. That would be cool. I would like that.
And remaster, I mean, as far as remakes though, I agree with Mike on just about everything. I would add to the remakes though, I think Secret of Mana is similar to how you mentioned Xenogears. Secret of Mana didn't get a proper like finish. It didn't, the game kind of it was being developed, if I remember correctly, it was being developed for the Sony, well, the Nintendo PlayStation.
Yeah,
before
the disc
that whole thing got scrapped.
Extension,
and that was going to be a system capable of just handling more. And when they had to bring it just to the SNES, they had to cut a lot of stuff. So I would like for that game to have seen its true original form, which would only be possible in a remake as opposed to a remaster. I think.
That's a good point.
Because
they did a remake, but they didn't.
I know, but the remake's stupid. The remake looks like a Teletubbies remake. It just looks like a different kind of thing. The color, I just hate their color palette. If they just had a better color palette, that game would look a lot better to me. But it's too pastel-y. It's too light.
Yeah, and I don't like the style of the remake.
Too saturated. I don't really either. And I thought it was cool when I first saw the footage of it being remade, but when you compare it to the original game, it's like, I'd rather just play that. The textures look better. Like the game looks, has a higher contrast. It looks way better.
Which brings me to one that I do want. I mean, it's already been done. I just want it here. Is the Secret of Mana trilogy remaster that's on the Switch in Japan.
Bring it over.
Bring it over, please. That's what I want.
I'm trying to think though. Basically, for remakes, like I agree with you what you're saying about like the old shooters too, like GoldenEye. They kind of sort of pretended to remake that for the Wii.
But it was with Wii controls, and I don't want that. I want I want on a controller on a PC or something, Yeah. But GoldenEye remade would a good remake of GoldenEye. I'm with you on that.
I would be down with that because it wouldn't be like the first person genre hasn't changed all that much. It would still basically be the same game if they could just. It would basically be a remaster, honestly, if I think about it. Just use 2 sticks. I don't know. But remaster all games and remake only a couple.
Remake games that need it. Remake games that didn't fill their potential or were bad and could have been good.
I like that you brought that up.
And remaster games that were amazing and masterpieces and good the way they were. Just make them accessible and convenient to have now. Now, that being said, we need a Quest 64 remake.
See,
not a remaster.
I was thinking about that too. I was thinking the only games that should be remade are bad games. Why are you remaking a good game? You made it, it was good. If you remake it, the chances it's going to be good again are low. Only remake bad games.
We had Melchior Blade say the same thing, Quest 64 remake.
Absolutely.
People talking about Superman 64
and
remake.
Who cares how much they change, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It only gets better from there.
All right. Thank you for that question, Captain Awesome. Appreciate you. Let's move on to Chris Guin's question here. This is an interesting one. What if you were given the task of converting Final Fantasy IV into a film? How would you make the story? Would you condense it or maybe stretch it out into the Hollywood requisite trilogy? What other adaptations would you make? Would you cut or add characters? Would it be animated or live action, realistic or stylized? How much of the soundtrack would you realistically use in a film? This is prompted by my realization that essentially all the character development for Cecil's pretty much over very early in the story. I feel like Mount Ordeals has to get moved to the end somehow to support a McKee-style narrative arc, or else you're just collecting crystals for 20 hours, or am I crazy? You're not crazy. You're correct. I think that would be the one thing that would make it work better in a film or in a television series is if he stays a Dark Knight a lot longer and really like wrestles with this like internal struggle of feeling like, you know, he's irredeemable, like what he's done can't be forgiven.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. But he's going to, you know, try and do what he can to fight these abilities that he's gained as a Dark Knight or whatever. He's going to use that to whatever extent he can to, you know, try and remedy the situation he helped create. But, you know, throughout the entire experience, he's still kind of just struggling with the fact that he doesn't feel like he'll ever get that redemption. And using the change to a paladin more toward the end of the story as the turning point for the character, and then, you know, you kind of go into the resolution of the story there, it would make a lot more sense rather than having him become a paladin so early.
That sounds good. You could also do a lot with his relationship with what's his name? Not Cecil.
Kane.
Your cool friend who's a fighter
Kane.
with you, and
Kane, can you hear me?
Kane. Yeah, Kane. Yeah. Sorry. I can't, when I'm talking, your voice, I can't hear it at all.
It goes away.
Yeah, it didn't used to be that way. Anyways, so for Kane, I think there's a lot that they could have done at the beginning of that game to build up their relationship before, you know, all the stuff goes down and you get kicked out and you've got to go do stuff on your own and stuff. Because it's like, to me, Kane's he's very loyal, and you don't know why necessarily. You haven't seen their relationship before the point of Kane having to make a very difficult decision for himself.
Sure.
And I think it would be better if you saw more of their relationship ahead of time before the Raid, that it would be a lot more impactful too.
You know, that's actually interesting. The way the game opens up is very iconic, because like it's just like the Red Wings sort of like flying into Baron or whatever, you know, and it's like, what have we done? We can't be doing this. And he's like, shut up. Don't question the king, right? And in the DS version, they have a couple flashes. Well, I guess they had it in the SNES version too. They kind of show like them like coming into the Mysidian's like chamber and taking the crystal and killing one of the guys or whatever. But as sort of like the it's like a given now for like Hollywood films. You have to open up on something like really exciting, some sort of exciting action sequence fight. It'd be interesting if they had like some sort of like battle sequence that they played out. I think the Mysidians, if I remember correctly, they were pacifists and they sort of just like let them walk in and just take the crystal. But if when they were collecting maybe one of the other crystals before that, they show like a battle sequence and Kane and Cecil are fighting side by side, because there's that artwork. I don't know if you've seen it.
Maybe not.
It's like a concept artwork for Final Fantasy IV, and they have their masks drawn, so like they have like the Batman eyes, you know, like the white eyes. And Kane and Cecil are like in the middle of poses where they're fighting, and it looks like they're standing on an airship of some kind.
I see him. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
So if they had a scene that sort of like is inspired by that image, where maybe there is an aerial battle and the Red Wings are coming in and they're fighting against somebody to go and like take their crystal from them, and Kane is there and they're like fighting alongside one another. They have some dialogue and you can see like how much they trust one another and they fight well together, and something like that as like an opening sequence, really exciting opening sequence. And then he gets assigned to go to Mysidia and take the last crystal, whatever. And that's when you start seeing his doubts about like, what are we doing? These people aren't even fighting us. Like we're just like laying their, killing these people with, and they're not even resisting at all. And that sort of like begins his questioning of the king. And then you can kind of carry into the story as it goes from there. But yeah, I think you're right. If you had an opening sequence that established a little bit, I know also in the DS version, they have a scene after Cecil's been stripped of his rank where you go out and you talk to Kane outside of the chamber, and he says something about how they used to train as kids, and they show like a black and white little flashback where Kane and Cecil are kind of like doing a little sword fight, and they have some dialogue. So the DS version has it a little bit, but yeah, I think if they added something in the beginning, that it would set that up a little better, like their loyalty, their strong bond, which would, I think, help make it more impactful.
Later
Spoilers.
Totally.
When Kane does things.
When things happen, exactly. The funny thing about Final Fantasy IV to me is that there's a very, when they talk about whether it should be a trilogy or a single film, the immediate thought I had when I read the first line of this question, what if you were turning it into a film? My thought was, well, it's got to be at least 2 films, right?
It's got to be at least 2.
Because the first, there's such a distinct, like, separation between the first half of Final Fantasy IV and the second half. Mm-hmm. There's such a very specific spot where it's like, whoa, everything's different. We're actually doing something very different now from what we thought we were doing before. Mm-hmm. And who we're going after is different. Maybe even a different person. Yeah. And it's like, but at the same time, that would make the first and second film 2 completely different films.
Yeah,
different
they feel
movies.
tonally
I don't know if
very
that would
different.
be smart to separate those like that. And so it probably should be done in one go. It's just, you would have to cut so much to get it to fit. But I think as a solid, as a single story, it could be a viewable 2.5-hour film, right? Mm-hmm. You would have to do some stuff to make it work. And it's funny because I like the first half is a little more of a generic fantasy story, right? Mm-hmm. And the second half is the craziest, coolest, most original thing that you've ever seen. But if I had to cut content, most of that content would come from the second half because I know exactly what I do for the first half. I have a lot of questions about the second half of that game, about how it would work and how you'd be able to pull off a lot of that kind of stuff. So there's some thoughts I have on that.
Yeah. Here's the other thing that I would do. And this is controversial, and it's also a spoiler. So if you haven't played this game and you want to, you got to stop watching.
Get out, people.
Okay. I would have the balls to actually kill these characters.
Ooh, yes, I know. You don't even need to say. If people are listening, they'll know.
Like, so many characters die.
Yes.
And then they don't actually die, right?
That was actually really disappointing late on.
It's the most annoying thing.
It's like, what?
It's the most annoying thing about the story. It's the biggest flaw in the story, in my opinion. They didn't actually have the balls to kill anybody. So I love the scene where Cid, they're like trying to come out from like the underworld or whatever. They're flying up, and Cid's like, I got this, and he like grabs a freaking like grenade in his hand, and he like jumps
dives off the ship, right?
And blows himself up like a kamikaze. Are you effing kidding me? And then you find him in like a hospital in some freaking town. It's like, what the F? There's no way.
It's unbelievable.
So that was dumb. Cid needs to be killed in that scene in order for it to have any power.
Yeah.
Palom and Porum, I think they should have stayed dead, but being turned to stone or petrified is not quite the same as literally blowing yourself up, jumping off of an airship. So it didn't annoy me as much, but still. I think it would be more powerful if they had stayed. Like they couldn't be revived or whatever. It would make the sacrifice mean something more. And then I think also Edward. I think like isn't there a scene where he's like poisoned or something, and then like the party is like, oh no, and then he like plays his lute and it like helps him somehow. I can't remember exactly what happens.
I can't remember how that goes either.
What was happening there? Anyways, it's been like freaking so many years since I played FF4, but those four characters. I think if you actually allow them to die or sacrifice themselves the way that they were suggesting they were going to, and I think it's really good for Edward's character arc too. You know, him being very cowardly and afraid and whatever. You know, feeling like he was probably partially responsible for the death of Tella's daughter, who was his lover.
Yeah.
And like him being able to be like, no, like I'm gonna step forward and I'm gonna like be brave and like overcome my fear and like actually do something. Could be a very, very good moment for him. Anyways, having the having the courage or the gumption to actually kill characters off, I think would make it a lot better story overall.
I agree with that. I agree with all of that.
Okay. Now, what were the other parts? Would you condense it?
Or add characters? I'd cut those like fairy girls at the end of the game.
Oh yeah.
They're not super important or anything, but still.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to condense the story.
Yeah, there's certain parts you just have to totally take out.
I'm not as familiar. My memory is not like the strongest because I think of all the FF games, this is the one I think that I haven't beaten in the longest amount of time. Because I think I've replayed basically every other FF game within the last few years except for 4, because I haven't actually played Final Fantasy 4 since my very first review of Final Fantasy 4.
Oh wow.
Which was back in like 2010. So it's been like 8 years since I've played Final Fantasy 4. I played like the beginning of the DS version a little bit as a replay or whatever. That was just on a stream. So anyways, I'd have to familiarize myself more with how many plot points there are and like which ones I think you could take out. But oh yeah, you know what? Yang's another character.
I know, I read that too. That's where it all started. Like with Yang is where it was like, is this going to keep happening?
Okay, now I understand letting one of those dudes come back.
Sure, someone can maybe not have actually died.
It cannot be Sid because of how he died. He has to die. Yes. Yang is kind of the same way. Palom and okay, if you were to kill off Ying and Sid, then you can bring Palom and Porum back because they're just petrified. They didn't like literally die. So I'll do that. I'll bring back Palom and Porum, but Yang and Sid are going to die for sure, and Edward can also. I think Edward can survive as well, and through that experience,
character arc.
Through that experience, he gains courage and overcomes his fear, and
yeah, he can live.
So only 2 deaths. 2 deaths. Yang and Sid have to die. Anyways, but yeah, I'm sure it'd be condensed a lot. And as far as realistic or stylized, or if it's animated or whatever, I think there's 2 ways I would do this. If I were going to make it into films, like 2 films, kind of like you're saying, I think that's a pretty good structure for it. I would do live action because I think of all the FF games I've played, this game would work really, really well in live action.
I think it would
because it's very like kind of just like traditional fantasy grounded, right? But if it were made into a television series, I'd want it to be an anime. I think
anime, I think fits it.
Yeah, I think that would fit it fine. So one or the other.
Yeah. With a lot of the stuff that happens specifically at the second half, for it to be taken seriously, I don't know how well it would be to pull off live action.
Yeah, it'd be hard.
I'm telling you, like the first half should be live action. The second movie could be 2 movies. The second movie's an anime.
Just pull a Kill Bill where like out of nowhere you just got anime in the middle of the movie. The movie just switches to
throw
anime.
it in there. Just I don't know.
If Quentin Tarantino could do it, we can do it, right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. That's all I got for that one. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Moving on
What
to
do
our
you good
final
movie then?
question. This one comes from Cynthia Chow.
Cynthia Chow.
With the recent success of Asian-led films, notably Crazy Rich Asians and To All the Boys I've Loved Before, the conversation about Hollywood leaving money on the table by failing to diversify their casts has resurfaced. Do you think the video game industry is limiting their potential by designing mostly white characters and setting their stories in Eurocentric inspired places? What else can video games do to meaningfully diversify the medium? So, this is a difficult one to unpack. I
Yeah,
want
that's
to
interesting.
say, first of all, that I like that you are putting the word meaningful in when you're saying meaningfully diversify, right? Because I think
Right.
that in a lot of ways, the pressure to do so can lead to a lot of not meaningful diversifying
Mm-hmm.
in casts and in casting, that sort of thing. And I don't like the idea of being pressured or only succumbing to pressure, I should say, um, and doing it just for the sake of doing it because it's expected rather than because a story calls for it. Um, that being said, geez, there were so many things I want to say. I'll start here.
Yeah, me too.
There are stories all around the world from since the beginning of freaking civilization that can be told. And they're very good stories. And so, at least to me, this is, I can only really speak for myself. I want to see all kinds of stories from all kinds of different cultures. And so it makes complete sense to me that if you're going to tell a story from a certain culture, you're going to cast people from that culture. That leads to the consistency and believability of the film or the game or whatever it is you're doing.
Mm.
Um, and so having somebody also who writes that story who deep understands it on a deep level is very important as well.
Yeah.
Usually people who grew up in that culture. So I'm all for seeing more stories from all kinds of different cultures around the world, um, and letting people from those cultures tell those stories. Um, and I think that like the reason maybe why at least in your estimation here, why we're seeing mostly like Eurocentric inspired places is because those have sold traditionally very well.
Yeah.
So it's like we know that doing a setting in a Eurocentric place or like using Greek mythology or Viking lore, that sort of thing, like that
Roman, yeah.
sells well. People are familiar with those things and they like them already. We already have a track record of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories that have used these themes and this mythology before, and people understand it well and like it and respond well to it. So it's I think it's more of like we know people are into this. I grew up with this kind of thing. I want to tell a story kind of like this. But man, would it be sweet if we could get like a really, really cool game based in like Native American mythology of some kind. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't see that, but that would be freaking sweet. I would love to see that. Go ahead.
So I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts because I agree but don't agree with a lot of like the basis for this whole discussion, I guess, because like you talk about in the question, it says Hollywood left money on the table, and you bring up the Native Americans. Oh, there should be movies made about the Native Americans, right? Or games
Not
or
not
whatever, right?
should,
Exploring
but
their
not should as much
mythologies
as
because they're cool, right?
yeah, not should so much as I think it would be interesting because it just
It
you
would
don't
be
see.
interesting. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't even ask the question. Maybe it's insensitive. I don't know. But like can Native Americans make their own movie about their culture, right? And I think what this comes down to a lot, especially when you mention or when the question mentions Crazy Rich Asians or To All the Boys I've Loved Before, there are tons of Asian-led films, tons and tons of Asian-led films that are made by the Asian countries.
Yes.
And they're really good movies. And people in America just don't watch them, right? And that's a consumer problem. That's not Hollywood's fault, right?
Sure.
People in America tend not to want to read subtitles, or they don't like it when dubs aren't perfect. And so, there's a ton of films that are being made that there's an entire country of Japanese people that are making films starring Japanese people, and they're really Japanese and they're really cool. And it's like, well, Hollywood comes along and makes a film based on Japanese something, right? And they cast a white person, and that's fine because the Japanese made their own version of that same story and they cast a Japanese person, and that's fine because Hollywood isn't necessarily this like global, they aren't the world's movie making like machine. They are the United States of America's movie making machine. They make films for essentially Americans, and the majority of Americans are white. So like when it comes to the whole European thing, a lot of times it's easy to look at it and say, hey, white people are so dominant in video games. But guess what? Most of these games come from Japan. Okay, that's not true anymore. Most games are probably made in America now, to be honest. But a huge chunk of games are actually coming from Japan, but they're still starring white people. And I think that speaks to like a different problem than the one that most people would jump to, which is like, oh, it's not diverse enough, because these games are made by Japanese people. And they're very Eurocentric. Like all the Final Fantasies are clearly Western oriented, right? Mm-hmm. And Dragon Quests and stuff. Like a lot of these games are like straight up European fantasy, and they always star white people, and they never have like even like Mario or Link or from the Nintendo games. These are always white people, but these are being made by Japanese people. So it's like there's a weird thing that happened there that I think Japan, especially with anime, they were okay with catering to the West and with making games and movies and shows that are basically have white characteristics in order to cater to the West, and the West like ate it up. So to the credit of Cynthia Chow, it like it's absolutely true. But I think it's very telling that even when the Japanese people are making games, a lot of the times their main characters are white people. And I don't know exactly why that is. Maybe some people in the comments can like maybe.
Well, one thing that I wanted to touch on as far as that goes, I'm sure you're familiar with the Lost in Translation episode that Landon did.
Yes. And a lot of Japanese people do feel the anime characters are still Japanese by nationality.
Yeah. So like they designed it.
Challenge the whole culture and say that there is definitely an element of foreignness to anime.
Well, that's the whole like cool Japan initiative.
Right? Yeah, they're catering to the West. Like
they wanted to boost their economy by attracting a global audience to their media. So with anime, with manga, with video games, they had like a government like initiative called Cool Japan to sort of like bring lots of cultures and look at the cool stuff that Japan was making in entertainment. So anime characters were designed specifically to be a little bit unclear or not clearly defined as one or another race in a lot of cases, so that you could look at that from wherever you are in the world and see a little bit of yourself in the character. Which I think is a really interesting approach and totally makes sense with the Cool Japan initiative, which is to bring cultures from all over and look at your stuff and, and find that it's relatable. Now, in response to what you were saying about, each country or each culture or whatever, making entertainment,
their culture, yeah,
and being obviously the majority of the people that would be represented in that culture's entertainment would be their own race or ethnicity or whatever. Yeah, totally on board with you there. It makes complete sense to me. I think that like
people just don't watch them though. People think that Crazy Rich Asians is like the first all Asian cast to be successful in like 20 years. And that's wrong. There's tons of movies that have come out from like Asian countries, but why aren't they watching those? That's just kind of a double standard, I feel.
well, I think that
because I
I
personally
guess
watch a lot of Japanese and Korean media. I consume a ton of it. I don't care about Crazy Rich Asians because I was like, what? I watch Korean TV like literally every day. I watch Japanese movies and TV shows like all the time. I don't like it's not a selling point for me that Crazy Rich Asians stars all Asians.
yeah, okay. So
They're
two
all
things.
speaking English too, so it's like this is Asian Americans. Anyway, it's just kind of funny.
So two things on that point. One, I think that maybe the one difference between like say films that are coming out of Japan or coming out of China or something like that versus America is that America for a long time like was, I guess the face of it was a come bring your poor and your those who are troubled, your refugees, like come here, like this is
Right,
a melting pot place where people from all cultures can come and into a land where they can prosper. That was like the idea of it. So
yeah.
there is, I think, more of a sense that the American that just Americans are a more diverse culture than maybe a lot of other traditional cultures around the world that had, especially like Japan, very, very different policies in terms of who they would let in for a very long time. They were very xenophobic for a long time, right? So, like, I think that while the minority here is the minority, and I think that it makes sense that if you're making something, you're trying to, this is a business, entertainment is a business, you're trying to appeal to the widest amount of people possible, then generally speaking you're going to be appealing to the majority. That makes sense to me. But I do think that the minority in America is a little different and much larger than it is maybe in other cultures like Japan. So
yeah, that's probably true.
I feel like that the idea of like greater representation is one that I agree with. But here's again where I think that for me at least, I like you, never once in my entire life has the race or ethnicity of a person or a cast in a movie been the drawing point for me to go see that movie or to play that game or whatever. I think that the reason I haven't seen Crazy Rich Asians, but I've read some reviews today because of this question.
Right.
And it's a good movie. That's why it did well. It's a really, really good movie.
But no one's talking about that. People are only
And-
talking about how diverse it is.
And that's what that's
They're not talking. I have not heard that it's a good movie. I've just heard that isn't it great that they're all Asian.
and I think that is where, for me, like the problem lies in the. I think it's a in a sense it's a distraction from like the real goal, which is to get more people involved and get a greater diversity of people involved. But if we're focusing on that, and that's the headline, and that's the reason we're talking about it, then we're not talking about like the art and the great performances and the great writing and the great everything else.
No one's talking about that at all. That's
made
not
this.
True. I'm sure some people are, but still.
That made it great. And the other Netflix movie that was mentioned here, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, I've
heard a lot about that.
I watched the trailer for that, and it's like, okay, that seems interesting. Like, it's kind of started off as one thing, and I was kind of like, oh, it's one of those movies, but it seemed through the trailer to like have a little bit more heart than maybe I was initially thinking. But the entire time still, I was not thinking at all. about the race of the main character. I was not at all thinking about any of that. I was paying attention to the story being presented to me and whether or not I thought it was interesting or that I would want to see it. Yeah. And I think that the more that we focus on race and ethnicity, and I understand, like, to a certain extent, if there is a problem with underrepresentation, if we have a movie that is about Asian culture or something being made, I think someone brought up, like, actually, Gods of Egypt. Wasn't that a movie that came out like a couple of years ago? It was about
with King Leonidas, right? What's his name?
I can't
the Scottish
remember.
guy.
Anyways, it was the entire movie was just like
it was a bunch of white people,
a bunch of white people playing Egyptians, right?
No, but they're playing Egyptians. That works, and no, it didn't work at all. Yeah, that kind of thing is really stupid. It's one thing to be making movies in America about America and be representative of the American population. It's another thing to be in America making a movie about Egypt and still having it represent the American population.
Yes, that doesn't make sense to me. And you know, another thing, I just personally, like, as an aspiring filmmaker and whatnot, like, I have always liked the idea of not casting big Hollywood stars, which is totally antithetical to the process of Hollywood. The first thing that they want to see if you walk into a producer's office is your package. Who is your director, who's your writer, and who's your star, right? They want to know those three things. They want the director, and
since the beginning of movies, that's how it's been. Yeah.
You got to have your well-known director, your movie star, and who's writing it, basically.
Is Tom Cruise in it? Is Brad Pitt in it?
That is like the bread and butter of the business freaking plan of every Hollywood movie in existence. And it works. People see an actor who they really like, is in front of the camera, charismatic, they like that person. I like this guy or gal or whatever. I want to see them in more stuff. So they cast them again and again and again. Now, I have always wanted to make a movie where every single time, you pick entirely unknown people. Because to me, it can sometimes be distracting because you just start to see Tom Cruise. It's not Ethan Hunt, it's Tom Cruise. You're never talking about Ethan Hunt. You're always talking about what Tom Cruise did this time.
Yeah, the stunts, man.
And that's fine. I mean, like, because Mission Impossible is not necessarily like a deep story or anything like that. But to me, like, the genius of something like Star Wars, which was only made the way it was because it wasn't a big budget movie, and, you know, they were barely getting by on the budget that they had, scraping by. But they cast totally unknown people, and those people become stars. And then their careers are, you know, made by this movie. And then what I would want to do is just let them go be in movies now. Go find new people. Go find other unknowns, undiscovered people. Bring them in and give them a chance. And what that does, I think, for the story is no one's distracted by, I saw this guy in another movie. To me, I see that character. I see Luke Skywalker. People become typecast, you know? I don't want people to be thinking of a character from a different thing. I want them to be meeting someone new every time they come into a new story. And so I love the idea of casting unknowns. And you know, I'm not sure how well known the Asian American actors from Crazy Rich Asians are, but it was really refreshing to be looking into that and seeing faces I've not seen before. Because to me, it's like,
you have no preconceived ideas of who they should be.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. Even well-known Asian American actors like, what's his name from Last Samurai?
Oh, Ken Watanabe?
Ken Watanabe.
Yeah,
I love Ken Watanabe. But as soon as I see him in Inception, I think of The Last Samurai, because that's the first movie I saw him in. And he's a really good actor. I like him a lot, but it's like that, and it doesn't ruin a movie. I'm not saying it ruins a movie for me because I've seen the guy in another thing before. But there are a lot of actors who are in tons and tons of movies, and it's like I see the guy and I think of the actor and not the character he's playing. And a lot of times they kind of just play the same type of character over and over again, because again they get typecast. This guy's always the boss. This guy's always the freaking like Weasley like sidekick guy. You know, like they and so like the actor themselves becomes a character that you recognize, and it's not like a new person. So I feel like casting unknowns and undiscovereds, I think, would go a long way in helping this issue of diversity in the first place. And
I like that.
It's entirely implausible to expect it. It will not happen because, again, Hollywood is built on the business plan of director, movie star, writer. Who is your package? Who is the package? Who are they a household name? If so, we know at least this percentage of people are going to be interested in because they like that movie star.
Which means they're willing to put at least this much budget into that film to make it.
Right.
So
go ahead.
So I like that because that's kind of like solution oriented. I mean, it's not a real solution, but it's an idea of a potential solution. And the thing I like about that is that it lays a lot, not necessarily at the feet of Hollywood or maybe even the video game community in general. The reason the whole actor, director, writer thing like works to sell the product is it's like the American people need to look into a mirror to find out why Hollywood kind of churns out the same type of content with the same types of people over and over. Because as you mentioned, when people see an actor they like in a film, they attach to that actor and they want to see that actor in other films, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's not so much that Hollywood has this like great conspiracy against, the people who aren't, against people who aren't already famous, I guess, even though some people do become, through movies like you mentioned, Star Wars. Every now and then people come in who are like, we don't have the budget. They won't give us the budget. We're going to have small actors. And then the film hits it big and those actors become famous again. And then they go and be in all the big budget films. But that's a problem with the culture. That's a problem with essentially American culture, and not just American culture. I would say that's global. I would say that's like a human problem, because when the Great Wall was being made in China, right? Do you remember this movie? It was The Great Wall starring Matt Damon. And do you know
right, yeah.
That movie was not made by Hollywood. That movie was made by, the Chinese government had something to do with it, but I think it was Zhang Yimou was the director, and he was going to make this super epic movie. And in China, they were like, we want a superstar, Matt Damon, and they bring him over. This is China, 99% Han Chinese non-white population. They wanted Matt Damon. I don't know if it's a representative of all of them. At least the producers in China were going off of the exact same model that we go off of, which is the people want to see someone that they already know and identify with. So Matt Damon was brought over to this huge budget, like $500 million film that was made, just crazy high budget. The movie didn't do very well, of course, because China insists on putting their propaganda in everything. But they brought Matt Damon in. I couldn't believe it when I was like reading about the process that film was made, because it just kind of goes against the logic that I hear of the whole representation idea. But the honest part is it's a marketing tactic. That's how they sell the film. And it's the fault of the people. It's the fault of us for wanting to see an actor over and over and over again, as opposed to an artistic film, a good movie. Who cares who made it? Is this a good movie or not? But there are so many movies to watch now. You have to filter somehow. And most people end up filtering by actor. And they say, who's my favorite actor? This is who I'm going to watch. And that's like the real problem. I think that strikes to the heart of the issue more than anything else. And that's a cultural problem, though. That's kind of like a human nature problem. People identify with somebody in a film, and films are it's almost like a dream when you're watching a film. Carl Jung has a ton of work on this, about how when you watch a movie, you're essentially like reverting to a childlike state where you're willing to suspend your disbelief in a way that's only really possible when humans are dreaming, right? When you're hearing a story being told, you're able to suspend disbelief the way when you dream, you have no idea what's going on and anything seems plausible because that part of your brain isn't technically working. And so the way humans work is that you identify with an actor and you bring them into your in-group. your tribe, I guess. That actor becomes part of your tribe because you identified so heavily with them, right? And so you're willing to like bring them into your mind and your culture, and you kind of like, anyways, it's a huge problem with essentially tribalism and the way that humans have operated for 500,000 years or 200,000 years.
So
anyways, that's a lot to say that the problem is with us, not with a few producers in Hollywood, because it really lies with the culture and with the population.
Literally, the only thing that governs what decisions are made in Hollywood is money. And I can guarantee you that if they knew that making a movie, let's call it the next Marvel Avengers or something, where you replace every single character with some minority, ethnically diverse cast, right. and they knew for a fact that was going to make money, they would freaking do it. They would do it in a minute.
And maybe that's what Cynthia Chow's getting at. Like, nobody could have guessed Crazy Rich Asians was going to make a ton of money. Maybe Hollywood should have put a ton of diverse people into their Marvel films. Like, maybe they should have. If they had known that there was all this money to be made, then they would have done it. And that's possible. That's possible. But people are trying.
Well, I think. What going along with what you're saying is the traditional line of thought is that. Casting the movie star, casting the familiar person is the most sure path to making money.
It is.
That's the real reason why they cast Scarlett Johansson in these roles that people were upset about, because they think the familiarity of Scarlett Johansson will bring more people in. That's like. And I'm sure that you're aware of this, Cynthia. I'm not trying to like be condescending and explaining something that everyone knows. But what I'm trying to say is that is literally the only governing factor behind that decision, is that they think the movie will make more money if Scarlett Johansson is in it than if some unknown actor is in it. Right. Regardless of race. If it's an unknown person, it won't make as much money as if Scarlett Johansson's in it. So the issue comes down to, like I'm saying, I want to see unknowns. I pursue that. But I don't think the general public does. I don't think the average consumer does. Like Kaysen's saying, people want to see something familiar. And that's not only a consumer issue either. You see directors using the same actors over and over and over in their films because they're familiar with that person, that actor. They know they know what to expect from them. They know what their range is. They know what they can do. They know if I pick that person, that's safe. I don't have to meet an entirely new person I don't know and learn how to gel with them and, kind of like get them on the same page as me. I already know. Quentin Tarantino does this. I mean, all directors does. Martin Scorsese, like, they cast the same people over and over and over again because they trust them. They've worked with them before. There's so much about familiarity, playing it as safe as possible. When you're playing with $200, $300, $400 million, you start to play things a little safely. when you're talking about...
That's a thing that I think everybody should kind of take a second and think about and put in perspective. It's easy to tell someone who's a billionaire what to do with their money. Mm-hmm. But if you were spending $200 million on something, taking risks it becomes a different thing. I don't know. Just think about that amongst yourselves, I suppose. Before casting judgment on the investments that these Hollywood people are making.
What is encouraging about the fact that Crazy Rich Asians was very successful at the box office is that unknowns can still, like, despite the fact that they may be unknown actors, that the general public doesn't know who they are, a good story. Well, again, I don't know if we can say whether it was the marketing push behind the idea of a diverse cast that drew a certain subset of the population who are advocating for that, who want to see more of that, and they went to see it for that reason. Or if it was also just because it's a very well-made film. It's a good story. It's good art, and good art gets good word of mouth, and then people go and they watch it. But to me, ultimately what matters in this is the story and being consistent in who you cast in those roles, that they're right for the part, and that it's culturally consistent depending on the type of story you're telling. But if the story's good, I mean, it's not a guarantee either, right? There have been a lot of really good movies that have not done well. I think of Blade Runner 2049, which I went and saw, and I thought it was freaking amazing. And it didn't do that great. And they had freaking, well, maybe not like an absolute A-list lead in, what's his name?
I can think of his name, or I can think of his face. I see his face.
I know, his face. I can't think of his name either. I'm terrible with names.
Anyways, Harrison Ford was in it for a bit too, though, right?
Yeah, Harrison Ford. I mean,
no.
I don't know. This is something that, without like sitting down and looking at data and like really breaking it down, it can be really hard to really determine like what was the reason something was successful or not successful. Why a great story didn't work commercially, but was like praised critically, but people didn't buy it. And it's true for games too. Or something that like shouldn't have been as successful but it was. Like there's so many factors, and it's hard for me to break it down to being just about diversity or lack thereof. I do agree that we shouldn't be Ryan Gosling. Thank you.
Gosling
on Renaissance. Jared Leto. I forgot he was in that movie too. That's true. He was also in that. So where was I? My thought there. I think that if there are actors who are being looked over or skipped, right, but they are right for a part, let's say for cultural reasons, and they're choosing somebody who is not a part of that culture, who doesn't understand it, who can't embody the character as well, artistically
happens.
Artistically, I look at that and I go, that's wrong. That's not the choice that you should make for the sake of the story, because I'm an artist. And an advocate of people who have not made it yet to have a chance to step up and have an opportunity. I'm all over that. That's what I want to see. But
you're not the one.
I'm not the one spending $200 million and going, I don't know. Like that's a lot of money to lose. And if I do cast this well-known actor, I will mitigate the loss by at least this number of dollars, which they can usually calculate. You talk about sports. They have people hired that are just stat analysis guys. Like their entire job is to look at stats and analyze stats, and they build entire teams around stats. They look at just data and like calculations and formulas, and they can freaking pull together how many minutes a player should be playing based on stats. He played this many minutes in this game, and on average, when he plays this many minutes, he does this well, and when on this many minutes, he does this well. So, I guarantee you that they have analyzed the crap out of this in Hollywood movie making as well, and that they can calculate.
It's Moneyball.
And mitigate the amount of money they can hopefully not lose by casting some movie star that everyone knows. And I believe that is more often than not the actual reason why the choices are made.
I think so.
As backlash gets heavier over the years, and as advocacy grows for this sort of thing, you are going to see more examples. Like Crazy Rich Asians,
well, it's because it's an advertising tool now.
Yeah,
and especially with the rise of social media and Twitter, and you saw it with Black Panther. Like all of a sudden, having a cast of relatively unknowns, but that fit really well into the role that you're putting them in.
Yeah,
it becomes a marketable thing. I think it's a good thing overall. I don't like that. That's all I heard about Crazy Rich Asians was that it was diverse, and I didn't hear anything else. But that was a new way that they could market without having an A-list actor. So that, I guess it's probably a net positive, I guess.
That actually is the last point I was going to make, is that
oh, really? Sorry.
in the same way that casting Tom Cruise again is a marketing tactic and a proven successful one, as more advocacy for greater diversity in Hollywood increases, that is going to equally become a marketing tactic. They're going to use that to say, this is why you should see it. It's not because you're coming to see Tom Cruise. It's because look at all of these, ethnic actors we have in it. And that's going to be a pull in of itself. That's a marketing tool that they're going to use.
It won't get me to watch the movie, but it does work for some people. And as long as the money is being fronted, then as long as the risk is being mitigated of casting, that's probably a better way to put it. As long as the risk, we're lowering the risk for casting diverse characters.
Yes.
And that's great. I mean, I won't see a movie just because of that, but other people will, and that's good.
Well, and I'm not just going to see a movie because Tom Cruise is in it. Like, but there are people, they know that there are a large group of people who will. And in the same way, I'm not going to go see a movie because of the diversity of the cast. I go to see a movie because of the story, if I'm interested in the story. I don't think about race. That's not part of my equation in deciding what I want to consume.
Yeah.
But there are people, and I'm not saying it's wrong, by the way. I'm not saying if that's how you think and you think that that's important, that's absolutely fine. And I support you in your endeavors to, seek for that. If that's why you want to go see a movie, they're going to that's going to become marketable the larger that market grows, and Hollywood will shift its direction to appeal to a market of people, a group of people. As the bigger it gets, the more that they'll pander to you. But again, like me personally, what I really would like to see instead is that people are concerned about the story. They're concerned about the art itself and the quality of the art, and not who necessarily is making it. And that's, like Kaysen said, though, that's just very hard on a biological level for humans, because tribalism has been what helped us to survive through amongst A-type predators or whatever for 100,000 years. Was grouping together and becoming the most powerful tribe. And that carries over into literally like everything else we do. And evolving out of or growing out of tribalism of that kind is going to be a process that will take, I think, many, 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 many hundreds of more years, most likely. But overall, this is a tough question to answer.
I like it, though. I mean, just through having our discussion, and through looking at, I've been reading all the comments people have been saying, and my position's modified a little bit. Like, I at least do see that even though I don't like the trend, it will lead to more, I don't know, less of Hollywood relying on just Tom Cruise to sell all their movies, right? And more different types of people, which I always think is great, because like you said, when you see a character, you see an actor you've already seen in a different film, it's hard to put that out of your mind and just see them in this film. That's always really hard to do. So I would almost be for having like a new cast for every movie I watch, a new cast of totally new people I've never seen before. And this does seem to be a very positive step in that direction, so that people who haven't had much of a voice in Hollywood, but still represent maybe, of the group, the group to which they identify, still like 5% of America, right? But essentially 0% of American films as far as the leading roles go. It can help kind of balance that out a little bit. I don't think the superstar thing is going anywhere, because human nature is at play here, and people identify with their in-group, which is part of why a lot of you people, especially some of you in the comments, that's why you are so much, you're advocating for greater representation in films, because you're rooting for your own in-group, I guess. You're rooting for your own like culture or the group that you identify with to be successful within the realm of entertainment, or wherever it may be, video games, however it is. And that's fine. But understand that same in-group preference that you might be exhibiting for your in-group is also being exhibited by everybody for their people that they identify as their own in-group as well. So anyways, just a thought, I guess, but it's tribalism both ways. But hopefully that they can all balance out, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I did a video on in-group favoritism a few years back,
Yeah, I remember.
But I mean that's exactly what it is. Like
Yeah.
it's human nature, and in the attempt to break free of our nature of favoring our own in group,
Which is
it
something
takes
all people should try to be doing.
it takes a strong cognitive effort to do that.
Yeah.
Like, and as much as anyone claims or strives to do that, I think that there's the primitive part of us that you can't really control. It's a primal instinct to latch on to the in group you identify with, and that's not only race. I mean that's Nintendo fans. that's
just favoritism of almost any kind, fanboy mentality.
Golden State Warriors fans and freaking
which did not exist 8 years ago.
I know.
By the way,
this is so pervasive in like almost all aspects of our lives. It's Apple versus freaking Microsoft. It's or Samsung or whatever. Like people naturally latch onto a group and they claim it as their own, and they want that group to succeed the most.
Sure,
and they want that group to win.
Well, that's how humans have survived for forever. So,
and
forever.
It's so difficult to use this part, the prefrontal cortex, right up in here.
The more advanced part that no other animal has.
No, I'm opening my mind to the fact that my group might be wrong.
Ooh, that's a thought humans have never had up until
and
like the last
no one wants to contemplate that.
All of history.
Really, it's literally painful in the chest region, right in here. It's like, wrong? I don't want to be wrong.
Well, because back in the day, if you were wrong, you died.
Like exactly.
It wasn't so simple.
It was a matter of survival. If you were right, you survived. If you were wrong, you did not survive. Now, in today's day and age, whether or not Nintendo is actually better than Sega is not a matter of survival, yet people fight over it as if it was.
It's true, because people have identified, they've taken that as part of themselves. Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy.
And so it's just so hard to break away from the emotional attachment about being right, about whatever it is we're talking about, in this case, ethical diversity in Hollywood, and to say, listen, step away from that emotion. Get away from me, please. Let's think about this. Let's look at the statistics. Let's look at the data, and let's determine, and of course that's not always the answer either, because sometimes you can't determine what is true just from observing. Sometimes it goes deeper than that.
Sure.
But as much as possible, it's important to do that. It's important to be open. It's important to listen. Very important to listen. That's the cure, really. Yeah. For problems such as this is the willingness to listen and to let the other person know, look, I'm not here to kill you if you're wrong, even though you feel that way, even on a subconscious level. I'm not here to kill you if you're wrong. I'm here to help you and I both reach a place where we can. Anyways, that's a very simplistic and what's the word I'm looking for? Optimistic way of looking at things, but it is, in my experience, really the only true way to solve problems.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I'll just say this to end my part of this discussion. Regardless of whatever I've said up till now, if you disagree with me, I in order to remain consistent with what I just said, I'm open to listening to your point of view on that. And I want to see what other people have to say about this, and if we can do that without while separating the idea that this person's here to kill me if I'm wrong, which has not been true for a long time.
Yeah.
Then we can have a good discussion about it. So ultimately, that's what I'm interested in.
Well,
okay.
I mean. Sorry, I'm just reading a couple more of the comments. Anyways, yeah, so I guess I'm in a pretty similar position. Yeah, I'm open to the one thing that gets me, it's all focused in America, right? But I personally don't consume much American media. Almost like 90% of the media I consume is from Japan, Korea, China, specifically the part of the world that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people will, because I'm white, right? People will accuse me of certain things, not a cultural insensitivity or whatever it may be. Whereas like all I do is watch Asian films and TV shows. That's literally all I do. That's not all I do. I work and I do this podcast and I make a video once every 2 weeks. But for the most part, when I need to be entertained, that's where I'm looking. That is where I get entertainment from. That is where, and a lot of, I've even noticed it, like, because this is just how humans are, but the adoption of the actors, the people you see on screen into your own personal in-group. Most of the people I've been adopting into my personal in-group, who I've identified with and like a lot, they're all Koreans at the moment, because I'm like, oh, I love this drama. I want to see them in a different drama now. And I even do have the thought of, oh man, some of these actors would be so good if they came to America and were in an American film. Oh, they'd kill it. They do so good, right? But they don't live in America. They probably don't speak English. They're in Korea. And so, it's not too much of a hassle for me to just lift myself up and not go to Korea, but, go there in my mind, go watch media from Korea, because I really do care about what they're making and their culture, and the impact it's had on my life is immense. And the diversity in that sense has really added a lot to my life through video games from Japan, anime from Japan, movies from China, like Ip Man, stuff like that. The Chinese, like specifically martial arts movies, they're super cool. And then in Korea with the dramas, and I'm beginning into Korean music as well. So it's like that has impacted my life so much that, I don't much appreciate the criticism of people who tell me I'm not, I'm trying to hold their culture back. But anyways, I have modified my position. I really have. I think next time I see a tweet lauding the diversity of Crazy Rich Asians, I won't think twice. I'll be like, yeah, cool. They're helping promote something that's going to add greater diversity to the field of actors, which is going to mean I won't see the same people in every movie, which I do think is a good thing. So I'm really glad we had this conversation. I'm glad it was public too. And I know my opening remarks may have been a little harsh initially, but I hope that, I didn't offend anybody. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah, I
do watch Garo. Garo is freaking awesome. Oh my gosh, Garo is so cool, and the way they put those suits on. Oh man, Garo is freaking awesome. All right, sorry.
Yeah, but as to the point you're making there at the end, anytime unknowns can find huge success in a movie like that, and they get a chance to launch their careers, I like to see that. And then I want them to go on and make lots of movies, and then I want to see new movies with people I've not seen before as much as possible. And it's hard to come across. It really is. It's really, really hard to find a movie that don't have at least one star in them, because, again, anyways, I'm repeating myself. We're done with this podcast.
How it is. We're done. It's over, people.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. You guys are beasts, and we will see you again next week. If you're listening to this audio only, come check out our YouTube channel if you're not subscribed already, Dark Pixel Gaming. If you would like to listen to this audio only, the link to do that, there are several links to several different ways to do that, in the description of the video, and so you can listen at work or while you're grinding in Dragon Quest XI when it comes out or whatever. So that's it. See you guys next week. Have a great day. Peace out.